Hi, my name is Jasmine Mohammad and I work for the Angelou Centre. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your annual Careers Day. I hope that some of the things I say in this video will be useful for you whilst you're looking for employment post-graduation. So the Angelou Centre is a national charity that is based in the northeast of England in Newcastle. We provide support to Black minoritised women and children that have experienced violence, and that's a spectrum of violence, so it includes domestic and sexual violence, honour motivated violence, which might include honour-based violence, forced marriage, FGM, trafficking, modern day slavery and immigration abuse. A large part of the work that we do is challenging violence, not just as it is perpetrated on an interpersonal level, but also as it's perpetrated on an institutional or structural level. And a lot of that work includes challenging national response and law and ensuring that policy takes into account the lived experiences of the survivors that we work with. So, for example, we do a lot of work to support migrant survivors of abuse and do a lot of campaigning work around the no recourse to public funds restriction and the impact that that has on the safety and survival of survivors of violence. The mission of the Angelou Centre is to enhance the economic, political and social independence of Black and minoritized survivors of violence. The Angelou Centre offer a range of holistic services, all in place to aid survivors to a meaningful place of recovery, and that includes our Violence Against Women and Girls Advocacy service, which includes an independent domestic violence advocate and an independent sexual violence advocate, therapy for adults, which is delivered by multilingual therapists that take a trauma and intersectional approach to support and recovery. It also includes Simba, which is a recovery programme for mothers and children that have experienced domestic abuse or sexual violence. It also includes a no recourse to public funds helpline, which is there to provide both migrant women and professionals advice around different immigration routes and to lobby to ensure that the rights of migrant women are upheld. It also includes Young Women's Network, which is to support young women to enhance their political and social independence. We also have a range of refuge space for women and children that are fleeing violence, and a large proportion of those refuge spaces are dedicated to women that have no recourse to public funds and therefore often can't access mainstream refuge space. And we also offer a range of different training and social activities for Black and minoritized women and their children. So my role is the Violence Against Women and Girls Advocacy Manager. So I manage the operation of our IDVA and ISVA services, which is the Independent Domestic and Sexual Violence Advocacy Support, the counselling services at the Angelou Centre. A large part of the work that I do is working on a strategic level to ensure that the voices of the women that we work with are really considered in both regional and national responses to violence. And just to ensure that we're providing a quality service to the women that we're supporting. So the steps that I took into getting into this current position was largely through volunteer work. I knew that once I started my degree, and I did my degree at Durham and I did a law degree, I knew that I didn't necessarily want to go into law, and I would really like to work for a charity, and especially a charity that worked to support women that have experienced violence, and to work within a charity that considers it within an intersectional framework, so particularly considering the way that race and gender intersect to create quite distinct forms of oppression. I knew that that was something I was interested in. So I joined the Pro Bono Society at Durham Uni, and I started volunteering for a charity, not the Angelou Centre, but a similar charity that provides support to Black minoritized women and children that have experienced violence. I did that for the entirety of my degree, and I eventually became project director of the pro bono side of the charity. Once I graduated, I then got a job in that charity, and it kind of led me to the role that I'm in now, which is brilliant. I think that probably the volunteering I did at Durham University was the most meaningful and amazing experience of my 3 years there, and I would really recommend that if you're considering getting into the charitable sector, that you do as much volunteering as possible, just to see whether it's what you want to do, and also because it creates really wonderful experiences and opportunities that you might not otherwise get. I think my personal experiences was that working in the charity sector, it's not something that you necessarily have lots of opportunities to try and get into. I think there are a lot more opportunities provided for more traditional roles. I know that there were lots more sort of options to maybe do corporate law internships or graduate schemes, but there wasn't very many offered for the charity sector. I can only think of Charity Works as the only sort of graduate scheme I came across, apart from sort of cancer research, where you could really, as a graduate, do work in the charity sector. So for me, volunteering was kind of the best way of considering whether I wanted to work in this field and to get into this field. My degree was really useful. So as I said, I did a law degree at Durham, and a lot of the work that I do at the Angelou Centre now is providing sort of advice and guidance around family law and immigration, and signposting the women we work with to specialist lawyers and legal firms that we work closely with. It's been really useful for me because I've been able to apply a lot of my learning in my law degree to the work that I do now, to be able to have a better understanding of the systems and processes that women we work with are going through. I think there were also a lot of transferable skills that I learned from my law degree, and that isn't really necessarily about what I learned, but how I learned it. So some of those analytical skills, the application of work, has been really useful. I would say that the main advice I would give for anybody wanting to get into a similar role or organisation is just to really do involve yourself as much as possible in extracurricular activities that relate to this work. I know that at the Angelou Centre, when I'm recruiting new staff, my focus isn't necessarily on whether that person has a lot of experience working in the charity sector, because actually I didn't have that when I first got into the role. I look more for people that I know are passionate and want to learn, and that usually is reflected in experience that they have that isn't necessarily in employment, but activist work that they've done, or campaigns that they've led on, or charities they've volunteered in during their degree. I think that stuff is really important because it shows that you're passionate. And I'd say that the work that I do, it isn't sort of like a 9-to-5 job. I think you have to really have that passion and motivation to be able to continue doing it every day. There are challenges that I face in my role, definitely. I think firstly, it's a difficult line of work in the sense that you see some of the horrendous ways that women are subject to violence, not just by partners but also by the state, and that can be quite difficult, especially if you for example are not in a place where you are able emotionally to cope with that. Maybe you're going through something yourself, so I'd say that can be quite a difficult element of the job. It's also a stressful job in the sense that the work that you're doing is impacting on women's safety and protection, and that's not something that can be taken lightly, so that could be quite stressful and difficult. But what I would say is, regardless of the challenges that I've experienced, the positives completely outweigh any of those challenges or negatives, and I truly couldn't imagine doing anything else or working in a different sector. It's the most rewarding work that I've ever done, and I would really highly recommend it if it's something that you think you might be interested in. I'm really happy to talk about working in the charity sector further, especially working in the women's rights sector, because obviously that's sort of the experience I have. So please feel free to sort of ask my email address. I'd be happy to talk about any of this further, and good luck. Thanks.